What's up? This is Cory Wong. I am here with Jackson Audio, Brad Jackson. We're here to introduce the Optimist. This is an overdrive pedal that has two different overdrives and an EQ, which is what I would argue the most versatile overdrive on the market. Come at me.
The character of the first overdrive is very much Klon-like. It's a complete, top to bottom recreation, exact voltages, exact components, all the mythical, impossible to find components that make a Klon what it is. It has all that in it.
Now, that's some of the technical speak. To me, when I listen to this overdrive and we were developing this overdrive, what I like about this sound is that it's the type of overdrive that has that mid bump, like a classic 808 sort of thing, obviously the classic Klon tone, but tighter top end, tighter low end. And, you know, for you, you're shooting after, all right, I want this exact recreation of this thing. To me, I don't necessarily care about what the actual circuit is. I care about how does it sound, how does it feel. Right. And to me, this Overdrive 1 has that exact thing. You know, I've loved the 808 sound, I love the Tube Screamer sound, but to me, I like a little bit of tighter top end, tighter low end. I feel like this gives that. I don't know whether it's an exact recreation or not. You're telling me that. What I know is that it sounds dope.
You don't get the real full extensions on the low end, and on the high end it kind of tucks that stuff in. And all that does for you, the player, is it makes your guitar stick out in the mix really, really hard. Let's hear it. Yeah, so that's the Klon sound right there. It's really articulate, very dynamic. One of the biggest things about the Klon that most people don't talk about is how does it feel? In your right hand, how does it feel?
Well, I like how it has a certain level of attack to it. I'm such a transient snob, I guess, more than anything. I'm not a circuit snob, I'm a transient snob. And what I mean by that is I am very particular with how something feels when I attack it. How fast is it? What kind of, does it round out the transient in the top end? Does it keep a full sound? And this, to me, this part of the overdrive works really great for it. And especially to me when I'm playing a little more of a lead guitar. So when I'm trying to play lead guitar and I want the notes to sing, this sort of circuit, this overdrive, really helps that thing to happen, like this. So talking about the feel, I can feel it responding different with my dynamics. And this, of course, is the way that you want things to be. It's what kind of gives the tone, it gives the sound life. You know, it's things that it's all these intangible things that we talk about. We talk about amplifiers, when we talk about analog components, analog pedals. This is just that thing happening. It responds differently than a digital overdrive. Like if I dig in, it has a different level of drive than. And also if I change what pickups I use, even if I go to my brightest settings, it still kind of keeps that rounded top end, right, which I don't know how or why this sort of overdrive does that, but to me it's very desirable because when I change my pickups, I still want it to live in the same realm. I don't want all of a sudden there to be some weird pokey frequencies. So you can hear it right here. And if I go to the neck pickup, I get the different tone out of my guitar, but it's not like all of a sudden there's weird settings that I need to change. The settings can kind of live in this exact mode no matter what position I'm in on my guitar. So with this overdrive, there's volume, tone, and gain. Now, we decided kind of middle of the road. I'm a knobs at noon when I get a new pedal sort of player. I think every pedal should sound amazing at noon, and that's what we did with this. So we have such a wide range of gain. What do you feel like is the most functional part as a pedal maker? Like you have to appease the entire guitar playing population, where to me, when we're developing this pedal together, I think at knobs at noon is what I want exactly as my tone. Okay, so that's what I want. Great, we're set. But I also have other situations that I'm in where I need more, where I need less. What is your approach to how much gain to put into a pedal?
Well, I'm totally in agreement with what you said about it should sound amazing at 12 o'clock. And all the amps we build, all the pedals we make, have that as kind of our mantra because, like you said, you can grab a PRS for 1 gig, a Les Paul, a Gretsch, and as your rig changes, as the gig changes, you want to have room on either side of 12 o'clock to get the sound that you want for that gig.
Sure.
So by having everything sounding really balanced at 12 o'clock, you have that freedom now. So there is a ton of gain in this circuit on OD1 certainly, but the strength of it really is not so much that one has more gain than the other one or a ton more gain. It's how you stack them together. Because there's a really great voice that happens when you run the Klon at 12 o'clock and then run the transparent overdrive, which is the OD2, together. There's something harmonic that happens that you can't get with a Klon, so it's a whole new take.
Yeah, totally. So I'll play a little bit. Why don't you show us the range of gain from bottom to top?
Okay, so what you did is one of my favorite things about a Klon. We're maxed out on the gain. You're playing bridge pickup stuff really aggressive. You flipped the neck single coil.
Yeah.
You didn't lose articulation. It's still cut. It sounds like something Mayer did in his live album back in Yeah. So it's a really great, super useful, sticks on the mix, doesn't get muddy. It's just a really great balanced overdrive.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this because no matter what the gain, I can adjust where I'm at with my pickups. I can adjust what guitar, and I think, to me, now I don't know technically what, we could probably analyze it, but I think because of the type of EQ, the inherent EQ of this overdrive, having that lower end cut out a little bit, the top end smoothed out, it just kind of helps. It just kind of, it's one of those overdrives that works for kind of anything.
Right. I agree. It doesn't stick out for one style of music. It's not a single voice.
Yeah.
It's just a good general purpose overdrive.
So moving on to Overdrive 2.
Sure.
The biggest, now I know there's a circuit that's different. If I say the biggest difference to me is the EQ, you say, wow, there's actually a ton of different things technically. I know there's a lot of things technically different about this. To me, what I like about Overdrive 2 is that the EQ response just feels to me like it's a little flatter.
Way flat. It's the opposite of what channel, or the first channel is. If channel 1 is kind of a mid bump, kind of a sweet and high, sweet and low, channel 2 is just flat as a board.
Yeah.
Which complements channel 1 very nicely, I find.
Yeah, and to me, when we were developing this pedal, I thought, okay, we could have two of the same thing, and they could be two different settings, and then when they combine, it's one thing. But that to me just felt like kind of a waste. Mm-hmm. Personally, I wanted something that had one very specific characteristic, Klon characteristic, and then this OD2, which to me feels a little more like I don't know, can I, like sounds maybe more like a Timmy or a Zen drive?
Yeah, it's that kind of a vibe. It's just a real, it's essentially like what you would call a tube screamer-ish type circuit, but it doesn't have that mid hump. It's just completely flat. So whatever you want to do with it, you can do with it.
The Overdrive responds a little bit differently. The feel is different when I play. And actually, honestly, I think this Overdrive 2 to me feels like what I like a little more in the rhythm side of things. Overdrive 1 a little more in the lead.
Right, it's faster, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody else might think literally the opposite. Yeah. That's fine, but that's also what's wonderful about these things is that it is all feel-based depending on your guitar, your attack, and it just the fact that, well, here, let me play it for you.
I would classify both of these overdrives as medium gain drives. They're not crazy, but the fun thing is when you start stacking two medium drives together. Want to hear it?
Yeah.
Let's go.
To me, when I'm playing guitar, the reason why I kind of test the entire range of the instrument is because when you get these drives stacked on top of each other, sometimes things just start to like kind of woof out at the bottom. Some things start to howl or screech a little bit more. Because these are two mid-level drives stacked, it actually kind of creates this thing that's, to me, pretty unique in the fact that it can be pretty high amounts of grit and dirt, but it doesn't get all that woofy low end and kind of like muddled low end when I start playing low, and it doesn't really squeal too much when I play high. So if I'll play across the range of the instrument again for you. A lot of times when I play these intervals down low, it ends up getting lost. Sometimes those notes can be kind of incoherent. You can't really tell what's happening. But for me, I play a lot of music with interesting harmonic things or thicker voicings or a little bit of a richer harmony. So when I have these on, because it's not two screaming overdrives, it still actually maintains the clarity of the note. You can actually pick out the notes. So that's really what I like about this, because playing low, playing high, I can still understand what the notes are. I still have that same energy. For me, I'm not thinking about circuitry. I'm thinking about energy. I'm thinking about how the feel of what I'm playing comes across. I'm feeling how it's hitting me at the time. And with this sort of pedal, I really wanted to make sure, okay, it's got to be something that sounds amazing on its own here, got to be something that sounds amazing on its own over here with its own unique characteristic. But then when we voice the two together, all of a sudden now it acts in a completely different way. And you can stack them in different ways. So one of them can be a little more kind of almost volume boosty, and one of them can be a little more drive. So if I turn a lot of gain on one and not a lot of gain on two, that characteristic then is going to be different. So I have this option. And I can also even take it a little bit of a step further. So now I'll do that same thing. I'll start on Overdrive 2 and then we'll add Overdrive 1. So maybe there's a verse of a song where I'm playing a little bit tighter. And I really need the tone to open up. So maybe the verse is tight, the chorus opens up. This gives me that option. And the beautiful thing about it is, because we're looking at 3 pedals in one, not only is it replacing 2 overdrives and an EQ, as far as just the pedals that I have and that I'm buying, it also saves that space on my pedal board, which, we're all, pedal board real estate is just as valuable as housing real estate these days. So having these 2 different overdrive options plus the stack option, then we add in one of the secret ingredients, which is new to me. Right. Now, you convinced me on this. I was not somebody who used an EQ pedal until a couple months ago. You kind of convinced me. You were saying, hey, you should check this out. It's like, what am I going to do with an EQ? Like, I don't know. It doesn't sound like a really fun pedal.
You're right.
Right? Like, it doesn't feel like a compressor to me. I have all the time. It's not as fun of a pedal, but it's just like part of my tone. It's not like, oh, I get to turn this on and all of a sudden, whoa, cool. It's so much different. It's just like, whatever. What I found about EQ is that it actually can shape things a lot, and it's really powerful. I completely underestimated what an EQ can bring to the table. So with this pedal, we decided, all right, hit both switches at once, and it turns on the EQ. Now, first off, come on, just look at that. That looks awesome. These clear posts, what do you call these?
I guess they're shafts, yeah.
Shafts, yeah. Clear shafts with the blue LED under. Come on. That just looks awesome, right? Now, one of the things that's really cool is with the bass, mids, and treble, they're all in a spot where they can be either additive or reductive, and they're placed at frequencies that are really guitar-centric. Like, they're not just random bass, mids, treble like you have in your car stereo. These are catered exactly to what you would want to add or take out in a guitar. Now check this out. With the mid bump, what it does is it actually kind of adds, to me, what I would consider it transforms my tone into a little more of the Robin Ford, Larry Carlton-ish Dumble vein. Right? Like, and yeah, I don't know. Just to me, it kind of adds that sort of tone, and it also adds a little bit of what people would maybe not confuse, but interpret as a little bit of drive, just because most of us are used to feeling some sort of mid bump with our overdrive. So this is the EQ on, just adding a little bit of mids. I'll show you a different pickup example. This maybe sells it a little bit more as far as what the mid boost is doing. just kind of gives it a little more out front. So on lead guitar, that's kind of what it adds. But if I was to do rhythm guitar with a similar mid bump, so you hear just with the pickup change, all of a sudden that mid boost, I think for me, just neck pickup actually kind of accentuates it a little bit. You hear it a little more obvious. Now, you can kind of do the opposite if you want and actually take some mids out. And what that would do, it kind of gives it a little more, check this out. To me, what that does is it kind of takes the characteristic of the amp away a little bit. It almost sounds a little more like the DI guitar sound.
Okay.
So because a lot of amplifiers are mid-focused, when you pull some mids out, it actually kind of, to me, gives a little more of like the Nile Rodgers, Prince direct guitar clean tone.
I never considered that.
Which is pretty cool because it, you know, most people would think you don't want to take away the characteristic of an amp. In certain situations, it can actually work in kind of a cool way. It gives a little more of that direct to the console sort of sound. Of course, on a Stratocaster, it already, to me, is a little bit mid-scooped, so it kind of just accentuates it even more.
Well, let's hear maybe a mid bump.
Yeah.
With something like the Klon, just to kind of get an idea how you can start stacking the EQ with the overdrives and see what that sounds like.
Yeah, to me, it takes it into that. It even, like, well, if I change to kind of middle pickup, it immediately, with the mid boost, it's the Clapton sort of like.
And the notes just seem to want to sing out.
Yeah.
Like when you're holding it out, it starts to kind of feedback all on its own.
And that, again, is one of those things where it's a feel. Like, to me, the other thing that I love about this pedal and that I love about how we purposefully designed this to have kind of a mix of the best of the analog world and the best of the digital world. Now, I've kind of taken the hero's journey of gear in the overdrive realm. I started with analog overdrives, just like most people, and then I've gone through digital, analog, and then kind of come back to blind tests. And I just had to say, okay, I'm not gonna look at anything. Same guitar, same amp, plug in a bunch of different gear, and at the end of the day, what I noticed is the analog stuff just feels better, it responds better. A lot of digital overdrive does sound pretty good, but it doesn't give the same feeling, it doesn't have the same responsiveness to my touch as an analog pedal. Now, the one thing that I do love about digital is some of the functionality, how it fits on a pedal board, how I can use Midi and that sort of thing. Well, what we decided to do was we're gonna keep all analog circuitry. This is an analog guitar pedal. The best of the overdrive world, analog. But we have a TRS MIDI in, so if you're somebody who likes to use a MIDI controller, what you can do is use that controller to turn on or off the EQ, the second overdrive, the first overdrive, all of them together, any combination of those things. So you could have this pedal anywhere on your board, your MIDI functionality will work with this, but you still get that great analog tone. Let's talk about effect order for a little bit, because I know many of you are probably wondering what goes into what and why. Now, we like to organize our pedals in a way that we make sure it's going to sound the best, that they're going to respond best and play nice with other pedals. Talk to us about the approach to what order these are in and why.
Sure. Okay, so the first pedal, or I guess the first circuit in the pedal is OD2 into OD1, and then finally the EQ. The reason I did it that way is because we've talked a lot about how OD1 is kind of subtractive. It tucks the highs and the lows. Well, if the first thing you hit is that, then you've subtracted that information, and you can't regenerate that information. So if we go into OD2, like we talked about earlier, it's totally flat, so all your information is there. Then you take that information, shove it into OD1, then you can sculpt from there. So if we had done it the reverse way, you would have lost a lot in translation. So by doing it that way, you get everything you want through it, and we finished it up with the active EQ, and I prefer EQs at the end. That way, you do what you want to do as far as gain staging and clipping, and then you just have a final mastering bus, essentially, to control the sound that goes to your amp. So that's the order. It seems to work really well, and harmonically, it's really fun because the transparency of OD2 into OD1 is just something dynamically wonderful.
The Optimist. Now, I consider myself somewhat of an optimist as a person, and I also have an album and a song called The Optimist. But I thought it was a fun name for this pedal because we as guitar players, I tell you what, I'm optimistic that this is the most versatile overdrive pedal on the market, analog overdrive pedal. You can get, somebody would argue, oh, you can get this digital pedal and it's got 100 different things, whatever. Find me one that sounds as good as this. Now, the Optimist, we got to be optimistic about recreating classic tones. We have to be optimistic about having incredible guitar tone that feels and responds the way that we want it to, and the way that is expected when we refer to things like the mystical forces of the Klon, when we are referencing things like these pedals, like these circuits, because it's got to be able to live up to that expectation. I have a certain expectation when I plug into pedals, and I need them to be met or exceeded, which this pedal, I'm guaranteeing you right now, will do. Now, when we were talking about designing this pedal, what kind of circuits to put in it, what kind of sounds, I said, I want that classic Klon tone. I want that classic transparent overdrive sound, but I want to be able to have a modern approach to it when I want. Right. So I said that, you said, I know exactly what to do.
Sure.
What was it?
Well, the EQ is really the heart of things because the Klon as it is, it has a simple control. It's a treble control. It's just a tone control, much like you'd find on your guitar. That's great. It works. But when you start to add an active EQ into it, you start to really get in some territory that the Klon was never meant to get into. And it becomes a whole different beast. So what we're trying to do is trying to give you the classic sounds of a Klon, bring it up to date, put an active EQ in it, give you sounds that you've never heard before. So we're trying to make it an all-in-one, just powerhouse of an overdrive box that'll cover everything from transparent, church music kind of stuff, really just ethereal, clean tones, all the way to just crushing heavy metal stuff. It'll do it all in one package.
Another thing that we were really considering when making this pedal is, what could we do? Do we just do one overdrive and an EQ? Do we do two overdrives and just leave it at that? To me, I am always considering how much room is being taken up on my pedal board. As most of you probably are. There's a lot of amazing pedals out there, and I want to use many of them. But what this Optimist pedal does is it gives me two different overdrives, it gives me an EQ, and it gives me two more spaces on my pedal board. Because I maybe would have just had overdrive, second overdrive, EQ pedal. Now I have a third of the amount of space taken up on my board, which either I can add more pedals, which most of you are probably going to do, or I could lie to myself and say I'm going to build a smaller pedal board, which is yet to be determined.
Yeah, you're right. I think in terms of economy and shipping costs and everything, for a traveling guy like you, yeah, having more pedals or having more sounds in one pedal, that's huge. And that's something we were kind of known for. We always try to give more than people expect. Now, you mentioned to me last night how much I wasn't aware how much session work you did and how much traveling and backline stuff you do. Let's talk a little bit about that, because we talked about how you backline, you get a twin, you get a super from whoever, and it's just a garbage amp, and you've got to just try to get through the gig. So how can this help you get through a bad sounding backline?
Yeah, the reality is, touring with Wolfpack, we never carry our own amps. I literally bring a backpack, my guitar case, and a small suitcase that has my pedal board in half of it. So what ends up happening is sometimes there's an amp that's a bummer. Maybe it's a little too brittle, it's too bright, it's got like some weird thing happening. What I've found with EQ pedals, and when we were experimenting with this, I played through a bunch of different pedals. I went to a friend's studio and played through a bunch of amps that were good, some amps that were less than desirable, just to see how does this pedal respond in different amps, in different settings, because I wanted to make sure that we were nailing it, right? So the thing that I found about this pedal that I didn't even realize was going to be such a useful tool is that with this EQ, if I plug into a bad amp that's really bright and brittle, because of the way the EQ is voiced, I can all of a sudden tweak the EQ on the amp as best as I can to try to make it sound good, and then help shape that tone even more with this, because these EQ knobs are placed in a way that takes out frequencies that you might not want, or adds frequencies that you feel like you need in that amp that you're just not getting. All right, so here's an example of what I would consider a bad amp tone. Harsh, brittle, not a lot of low end, not a lot of body, just kind of, it's the best I could get out of this amp. Now, some people might prefer this amp tone, I don't. So I'm gonna look for a certain tone. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna back off some treble, because I think it's too bright. I'm gonna keep the mids the same just to see where I'm starting, and then add a little bit of bass and see what happens. Already I'm feeling much better about where I'm at. As opposed to right there is the power of EQ. It can make a bad sounding amp fuller. It can bring it to life. I always feel weird playing heavy without a band. Thanks for hanging out with us today. My name's Cory Wong, Brad Jackson from Jackson Audio. Check out The Optimist.